Hello everyone, Circeon here. How are you all doing today? This video will serve as a guide as to where you can find a copy of every single skill book in Skyrim. There will be timestamps to every individual skill if you're just looking for a particular set. This journey will largely be done at level 1 with as few quest or faction affiliations as possible for the purposes of sparing your characters from having to do things against their alignments. With that said, we'll need a character ourselves to get this journey started. So allow me to introduce y'all to Scholar Scholarson. We blow past the Skyrim intro, make our way out of Helgen, and sprint down to Riverwood to pawn off some junk for our cab fare. But getting these books will be dangerous, so first and foremost we'll need to arm ourselves for the journey ahead. This can be easily done by reading the note in the Drunken Huntsman over in Whiterun before catching a cab over to Solitude and speaking to Aventus Cassianus, who gives us a key to a footlocker filled with gear. After that, we take a short stroll to the northwest of Solitude to grab the Steed Stone in order to mitigate the stamina drain of our heavy armor. With our preparations now complete, we can begin our literary expedition, starting with our first alchemy book can be found within Huntingbrew Meadery just outside Whiterun. All you have to do is go upstairs, pick the lock to Sabjorn's room, and the book, A Game at Dinner, can be found on the table closest to the door. Our next alchemy book can be found within Grave Concoctions in Falkreath. Simply head to the wall beside Zarya's bed, and toss away this basket to find a copy of the book De Rerum Direnis. The next alchemy book can be found within Arcadia's Cauldron in Whiterun. All you have to do is head right upon entering to find a copy of the book Herbalist's Guide to Skyrim sitting on a table. The next alchemy book can be found slightly east of Dragonbridge. There, you can find a leveled mage guarding an alchemy table with the book Manamarco, King of Worms sat nearby. The final alchemy book can be found within Anissa's cabin just north of the Guardian Stones. Simply walk inside and you can find Song of the Alchemist sitting on the shelf at the foot of Anissa's bed. With every alchemy book now acquired, it's time to start searching for our first Alteration book can be found within Coralder's house in Winterhold. Simply toss the basket directly in front of you upon entering to find a copy of the book Breathing Water hidden within. The next Alteration book can be found within Understone Keep in Markarth. Simply walk up the steps towards the Jarl's throne before making a sharp right turn where you can find a copy of the book Darter in the Nibbin sitting on a table. The next Alteration book can be found within Snowshot Farm near Riften's southern entrance. Upon entering the abode, simply walk downstairs where you can find a copy of the book Reality and Other Falsehoods on a shelf next to some cheese. The next Alteration book can be found north of the wreck of the Brinehammer just east of Dawnstar. To get this book, simply perch yourself on the smaller inlet behind the boat and point your compass directly northward. Then take a plunge into the depths below and head straight until you find a large chest, where upon picking the lock you can find a copy of the book Sithis. The final Alteration book can be found within the Solitude Lighthouse on the northeastern shore of Solitude. After convincing Masaka to let us take a peek around, you can find the book The Lunar Lorcan on a shelf near a keg of ale. Now that we've collected every Alteration book, it's time to start searching for our first archery book can be found atop the Twilight Sepulchre east of Falkreath. There you can find a copy of the book Father of the Nibbin sitting within a ring of mushrooms. The next archery book can be found within the Drunken Huntsman in Whiterun. All you need to do is simply round the counter to find a copy of the book The Black Arrow Volume 2. The next archery book can be found within the living quarters of Jorvaskr, also in Whiterun. Upon entering the quarters proper, simply head down the hall before making 2 left turns to reach Ayela's room, where you can find a copy of the book The Marksmanship marksmanship lesson behind a locked display case. The next archery book can be found within the Solitude of Fletcher. Simply turn left upon entering to find the book The Gold Ribbon of Merit sitting on a table. The final archery book can be located within the Treasury House in Markarth. Simply hang left upon entering to find a copy of the book Volnicus and Balor nestled between a broom and an apple. With all 5 archery books now obtained, we can move on to our first block book can be found at Trader's Post, east of Windhelm. After clearing out some bandits, you can find the book A Dance in Fire Volume 2 on the bottom shelf of this dresser. The next block book can be found at Redwater Den, northwest of Riften. Simply enter the structure to find a copy of Battle of Red Mountain sitting on a table. The next block book can be found within Whiterun's Hall of the Dead. Just turn left upon entering the catacombs to find the book Deathblow of Abernonnet on a table surrounded by some candles. The next block book can be found within the Forsaken Cave west of Windhelm. After clearing out a few Draugr, you can find the book The Mirror on a table surrounded by iron ingots. The final block book, Warrior, can be found across the eastern shore of Dragonbridge, next to a chest within a small bandit camp. Now that we've acquired every block book, it's time to move on to our first Conjuration book can be found within the Mortar and Pestle in Dawnstar. Simply round the counter to find a copy of 2920 Hearthfire Volume 1. Our next Conjuration book can be found within Balin's house in Windhelm. All you gotta do is head upstairs where you can find 2920 Frostfall Volume 10 nestled behind a dresser near Balin's bed. The next Conjuration book can be found at the Falkreath Watchtower north of Falkreath. Simply climb the stairs, kill the leveled mage, and you can find the book Liminal Bridges in the tent next to an extinguished fire. The next Conjuration book can be found within Falkreath's Hall of the Dead. To get the book The Doors of Oblivion, simply head right to find it underneath the bed on the left. The final Conjuration book can be found within the Jarl's Chambers of Understone Keep in Markarth. Simply take a left before the Jarl's throne before taking a right past these guard dogs. After picking the lock to the Jarl's chambers, head inside to find the Warrior's Charge on a dresser at the foot of the Jarl's bed. With every Conjuration book now collected, we can move on to our first destruction book can be found within the Arantino residence in Windhelm. Simply walk up the stairs and take a hard left to find the book A Hypothetical Treachery hidden behind a bookcase. The next destruction book can be found within the Glenmoral Coven northwest of Falkreath. After entering the chamber with 2 lit braziers, you can find the book Horror of Castle Zir in a box within the tent at the far side of the room. The next destruction book can be found within Berna's Ottomans in Winterhold. To get this book, simply walk up the stairs to find Mystery of Talara Volume 3 on a dresser to the left of Berna's bed. The next destruction book can be found within the Ironbreaker Mine in Dawnstar. Simply take the first left upon entering to find the book Response to Barrow's Speech atop this barrel. The final destruction book can be found within the White Hall, also in Dawnstar. Simply walk up the stairs to your left to find a copy of the book The Art of War Magic sitting on a table on the balcony. Now that we have a copy of every destruction book, we can move on to our first Enchanting book can be found in the White Hall in Dawnstar. Simply take a left into the War Room to find a copy of Catalogue of Weapon Enchantments nestled between a barrel and a keg of ale. The next Enchanting book can be located within the Glenmoral Coven northwest of Falkreath. Simply enter the room marked with a Spriggan's corpse to find a copy of A Tragedy in Black beside the enchanting table. The next Enchanting book can be found within Fort Amal. Upon entering, the book Catalogue of Armor Enchantments can be found on the dresser next to an enchanting table. The next Enchanting book can be located within Carlotta's house in Whiterun. Simply head up the stairs upon entering into Carlotta's room to find a copy of Enchanter's Primer beside her bed. Our final enchanting book can be found within the Jarl's Longhouse in Winterhold. All you need to do to grab a copy of Twin Secrets is head into the Jarl's chambers and retrieve it from within this basket atop this barrel. With every enchanting book now in hand, we can move on to the first heavy armor book can be found within the Morthal Guardhouse. All you need to do is head right towards the fireplace and toss this basket aside to find a copy of the book 2920 Mid-Year Volume 6. The next heavy armor book can be located in an area dubbed Darkwater Overhang just north of Iverstead. This area is the one guarded by a troll that you'll most likely see upon exiting the small village, and the book Chimera Vamidium can be found on the corpse next to the troll skull. The next heavy armor book can be found within Jorvaskr in Whiterun. Simply head towards the living quarters upon entering before making a sharp left turn to find the book Haligard's Tale sitting on a cupboard. The next heavy armor book can be found within the cellar of Dushnek Yalng just southeast of Markarth. Simply lockpick your way into the longhouse, then cellar, to find the book Orsinium and the Orcs on a table beside the stairs. The final heavy armor book can be found within the Palace of Kings in Windhelm. Simply take a sharp left into the upstairs living quarters upon entering before making 2 more sharp lefts to find a copy of the book The Knights of the Nine on the top shelf of this dresser. Now that we have every heavy armor book, we can begin searching for our first illusion book can be found within the White Phial in Windhelm. Simply round the counter upon entering to find a copy of the book The Blackguards on Trial. Our next illusion book can be found within the Jarl's living quarters in Dragon's Reach. Simply head upstairs into Balgruuf's room and take a right to find a copy of the book Before the Ages of Man sitting on a desk. The next illusion book can be found at a shrine of Dibella just south of Dawnstar. You can see this shrine to your left upon walking the southern road, and upon scaling the hill you can find the book Incident of Necrom to the right of the altar. The next illusion book can be found within the Temple of Dibella's inner sanctum in Markarth. After picking the lock to the inner sanctum and yapping with Hamal, you can find the book 2920 Sun's Dawn Volume 2 on the bottom shelf of the right-hand bookshelf. The final illusion book can be found within Nepos' house, also in Markarth. All you gotta do is enter the room on the right and turn left to find a copy of the book Mystery of Talara Part 4 near the lit candlestick. With every illusion book now in hand, we can begin searching for our first light armor book can be found within the Markarth guard tower. Simply head down the stairs and enter the room on the right to find a copy of the book Ice and Chitin on this table in the corner of the room. The next light armor book can be found at the Autumnwatch guard tower south of Iverstead. All you gotta do is walk up the steps of the right guard tower where you can find Yarnabray's Last Dance on a crate next to some wine and a lantern. The next light armor book can be located within Fort Greymore just west of Whiterun. All you gotta do upon entering is take a left and then head up these stairs where you can find the book Rizlov the Righteous on a podium in the boss room. The next light armor book can be found within Castle Dower in Solitude. Simply take a right upon entering before heading downstairs where you can find a copy of the book The Rear Guard sitting on a table. The final light armor book can be found within the abode of the Solitude Blacksmith. All you gotta do is head upstairs where you can find a copy of the book The Refugees on a shelf of the eastern wall of Berdrin's bedroom. With every light armor book now in hand, it's time to move on to our first lockpicking book can be found within the sewers located at the Riften Docks. Upon entering the sewers, hang right before disarming this bear trap and acquiring the book Advances in Lockpicking from atop this barrel. The next lockpicking book can be found within Riften's Mistveil Keep. Upon entering, simply walk up the stairs behind the Jarl's throne into their living quarters, whereupon you can enter the middle door to find the book Survey of Thieves next to the Jarl's bed. The next lockpicking book can be found within the Sidna Mine in Markarth. All you gotta do is head leftwards up the ramp till you reach this cell where you can find the book Proper Lock Design on a bookshelf to the right. The next lockpicking book can be found within the High Moon Hall in Marthal. Simply walk upstairs to the room on the right where you can find the book The Locked Room on the top of this bookshelf. The final lockpicking book can be found within the prison barracks of the Dawnstar Guard Barracks. After picking the lock to the cell directly in front of you, you can find the book The Wolf Queen Volume 1 sitting in the right-hand corner of the room. With every lockpicking book now collected, we can move on to our first one-handed book can be found within Jorgen and Lami's house in Morthal. To get the book 2920 Morningstar Volume 1, all you need to do is toss away this bucket on the left side of the room to claim your reward. The next one-handed book can be found east of Winterhold and southwest of the Pride of the Tel Voss. Located on the shore near this half-submerged tree, you can find a copy of the book Fire and Darkness. The next one-handed book can be found within the captain's quarters of Fort Greenwall, just north of Riften. To reach the captain's quarters, simply climb these stairs before taking a right. Once inside, the book Mace Etiquette can be found in the room with the boss chest. The next one-handed book can be found at a bandit camp slightly south of the Guardian Stones. To retrieve the book Night Falls on Sentinel, all you gotta do is walk up the hill and swipe it from the tent on the left. The final one-handed book can be found within the Markarth Guard Tower. Simply head down the stairs and enter the room on your right to find a copy of the book The Importance of Wear sitting on a table with some armor. Now that we've collected a copy of every one-handed book, we can move on to our first pickpocket book can be found within Helga's bunkhouse in Riften. Simply walk up the steps and then make 2 left turns to find a copy of the book Beggar sitting atop a dresser. Our next pickpocket book can be found within Honor Hall Orphanage, also in Riften. Simply walk straight directly into Constance's room to find the book Purloined Shadows nestled between the bed and dresser. Just make sure to clean up the trash before leaving. Our next pickpocket book can be found within the Jarl's Longhouse in Falkreath. Simply enter the Jarl's bedroom and pick the lock of the left display case to grab a copy of the book Guide to Better Thieving. The next pickpocket book can be found within the Argonian assemblage at the Windhelm Docks. Simply head left upon entering to find the book Thief atop a dresser next to an unlit lantern. The final pickpocket book can be found within Thronir's house in Morthal. All you gotta do to claim Avar Stonesinger is head left and retrieve it from underneath this basket. With every pickpocket book now in hand, we can move on to our first restoration book can be located within Falian's house in Morthal. Simply head right once inside to find a copy of 2920 Rain's Hand Volume 4 sitting on a table near Falion's bed. The next restoration book can be found within the Moorside Inn, also in Morthal. Simply enter the room left of the counter to find a copy of Racial Phylogeny hidden inside this basket. The next restoration book can be found within Frostflow Lighthouse, just east of Dawnstar. Simply enter the leftmost room upon entering to find a copy of Mystery of Talara Volume 2 on a dresser behind the door. The next restoration book can be found within the Frozen Hearth Inn in Winterhold. All you gotta do is make your way into the basement upon entering, where you can find a copy of the book The Exodus nestled between these crates. The final restoration book can be found within the Temple of Kinnereth in Whiterun. Upon entering, simply head into the priestess's bedroom to find a copy of the book Witherskins on the middle shelf of this bookshelf. Now that we've acquired all 5 restoration books, we can begin looking for our first smithing book can be found at the Skyforge near Jorvaskr in Whiterun. Simply head up to the Skyforge to find a copy of the book The Armorer's Challenge near an unlit torch scone. The next smithing book can be found within the Quicksilver Mine in Dawnstar. To get a copy of the book Karim's Heart, simply continue straight upon this scaffolding where you can find this book at the end of the trail near a Quicksilver ore deposit. The next smithing book can be found within the East Empire Warehouse at the Solitude docks. All you gotta do is sneak your way up this ramp and continue till you descend, whereupon you can do a 180 to find a copy of the book Heavy Armor Forging on a shelf full of iron ingots. The next smithing book can be found within Gallows Rock, southwest of Windhelm. As you make your way through, you'll eventually find a room with an anvil and workbench where beside on a table lies the book The Last Scabbard of Akrosh. The final smithing book can be found within Embershard Mine just east of the Guardian Stones. All you gotta do is enter the boss room where the book Light Armor Forging can be found on a table next to a weapon rack. With all 5 smithing books now acquired, we can move on to our first sneak book can be found within Redrun's Retreat to the west of Whiterun. All you gotta do is enter the boss chamber where the book 2920 Last Seed Volume 8 can be found on a crate on the left hand side of the room. The next sneak book can be found within the cellar of the Nightgate Inn west of Windhelm. You can simply enter the cellar by hugging the right hand wall outside, whereupon you can find the book Legend of Cratley House on a drawer on the right hand side of this non-conspicuous orc's bed. And here, dear viewer, is where things go awry. For those of you who skipped to this part of the video, I'm very sorry to inform you that you ended up drawing the short end of the stick. You see, I tried to find this next book in 2 separate locations, but to no avail. First was this stone circle located southeast of the abandoned shack, but even with the ritual stone, I could not find the dead Draugr who held this book. So I then stormed Deepwood Redoubt to the west of Dragonbridge. But after clearing both the inn and outside, the book simply wasn't there, which meant my only other option was to gain entry into the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary. So after disposing of Dami Dipswit and her gaggle of gutless goons, I can now reveal the location of this one book. Upon entering the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary, head down the stairs and then up the stairs to the right of the word wall. Then take a right before taking a hard left into the room with the unlit candles to find a copy of the book Sacred Witness on a counter to the left of Babette's bed. The next sneak book can be found within the New Genesis Corner Club in Windhelm. All you gotta do for this book is head into the back room where you can find the Red Kitchen Reader hiding underneath the staircase. The final sneak book can be located slightly south of Shore's Watchtower, where you can find the book 3 Thieves within this hollowed out tree. Now that we've finally acquired all 5 sneak books, we can move on to our first speech book can be found within Sadre's Used Wares in Windhelm. Simply round the counter to find a copy of the book 2920 Second Seed Volume 5. Our second speech book can be found within Dead Man's Drink in Falkreath. Like before, simply round the counter to find a copy of the book A Dance in Fire Volume 6. Our third speech book can be found within Arnlife & Sons Trading Company in Markarth. All you gotta do is head left of the counter to find a copy of the book A Dance in Fire Volume 7 sitting on a crate. Our fourth speech book can be found within the Jarl's bedroom within the Blue Palace in Solitude. Simply take a left up the stairs before rounding the corner into the room with the giant doors where you can find the book Biography of the Wolf Queen sitting on a dresser in the right hand corner of the room. The final speech book can be found within the Bard's College, also in Solitude. All you gotta do is head up the stairs before taking 2 rights to find the book The Buying Game sitting on the top shelf of the left-hand bookshelf closest to the window. Our literary expedition is now nearly at an end. Only 5 more books to go, and those books are our first 2-handed book can be found within the house of Clan Battleborn in Whiterun. Simply enter the room on your left upon entering to find the book Battle of Sangor on a bookshelf beneath a green apple. The next 2-handed book can be found within the living quarters of Jorvaskr, also in Whiterun. Simply make your way down the hall to find the book Song of Hrormir sitting on the table with a sprawled out map. The next 2-handed book can be found within the Penitus Oculatus outpost in Dragonbridge. Dragon Bridge. Simply head to the right upon entering to find the book King sitting atop a dresser. The next two-handed book can be found within the Falkreath Guard Barracks. Simply head up the stairs on your left to find the book The Legendary Sancre-Tor atop the chest at the foot of the third bed. The final two-handed book can be found within the Mistveil Keep Guard Barracks in Riften. All you gotta do is head up the stairs on your right and swing towards the fancier bedside to find a copy of the book Words and Philosophy atop a dresser. And with that, we've acquired every single skill book in Skyrim. If only that were true. No, there's still one more skill book left for us to obtain. So let's head on north to grab ourselves the legendary and infamous. To acquire the Oghma Infinium, we'll first have to make our way to Septimus's outpost to the north of Winterhold. After speaking to the remaining fragments of Septimus's sanity, we're sent off to Aftland, southwest of Winterhold, where we have to face off against a horde of dwarven clankers before getting mobbed by a horde of literal basement dwellers. Once that's done, we can simply follow the piss-stained road over to the Tower of Mazark, where we can complete a puzzle designed for literal infants, grab the newly transcribed Rubik's Cube, and hand it over to Septimus, who doesn't give us the essence extractor. Hold on a moment. Okay, according to the wiki, you have to be level 15 to start the Oghma Infinium quest, so I guess it's time to see if this expedition paid off. It did indeed. Now all we gotta do is collect some blood for the blood god before watching Septimus inject the slurry directly into himself and some zero from the subsequent AIDS-splosion, allowing us to claim the 91st and final skill book in Skyrim. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. This journey took me a total of 11.5 hours to complete. If you enjoyed the video or found the books you were looking for, why don't you go ahead and give this video a like? For those of you who've made it this far, let me give you a few additional stats. Of the 91 books we obtained, 56 of those were stolen, which totals out to a whopping 61%. And if we were to subtract the Oghma Infinium from that total, the percentage would go up to a staggering 62%, which isn't too much of an increase, but it's still surprising to know that many books had to be stolen along this journey. I'm kinda just rambling on at this point until the video